Hey guys, it's Madison. Today's video is about episode 3 and 4 of the new adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. Since we're almost to the halfway point in this miniseries, there's going to be a ton of spoilers in this video. There's also going to be spoilers for the book and the original miniseries, so if you don't know how The Stand ends, you might want to leave now. Episode 3 begins with a scene that is pulled directly from the book. A seance where Flag scares a bunch of little girls and effectively begins grooming Nadine to be his. This scene has lots of creepy pedophile subtext, which I'm sure was intentional because Flag is, evil. This is definitely one of the highlights of the new miniseries so far because it offers us something from the book that was not in the original miniseries. In episode 3, we finally get introduced to my favorite character, Nick Andros. I have to say, I really like this actor's portrayal of this character, even though the script keeps cutting Nick's best moments. I really dislike how they cut the scene where he takes care of the prisoners and becomes friends with the sheriff. And I feel like they most likely did this to make more screen time for other characters who aren't going to die in an explosion in a few episodes. But still, how am I going to be mad about Nick's untimely death if you keep cutting all of his scenes? So instead of the prison, Nick takes care of the guy who beat him up, who has been handcuffed to a bed in the hospital. Apparently everyone else in the hospital is dead, so it's up to Nick to care for the guy who beat him up. And this guy doesn't do anything except lie in bed and die. He doesn't try to kill Nick like he did in the original miniseries and the book. That subplot was really important for Nick's character because it showed his constantly forgiving nature and how even after it backfires whenever he tries to help the guy who tried to kill him and that guy ends up trying to kill him again, rather than become bitter and jaded, Nick is still a kind, compassionate person. And it really shows who he is. And unfortunately, they cut that subplot. So aside from the fact that this timeline just can't seem to sit still for more than 5 minutes, all the scenes that they've taken from Nick's storyline has been my biggest disappointment so far. One scene that I really liked was when Fran, Harold, and Stu met. Their interactions felt real and genuine. Unlike the original miniseries where their first meeting just felt awkward, you could feel real tension between Stu and Harold. You could feel Harold's fear and jealousy, as well as his entitlement whenever he said, "You can go with him or you can stick with the guy that's been keeping you alive these past few weeks and that saved your life," referring to Fran's suicide attempt. So they have made good use of the suicide attempt subplot that they introduced in the first episode. Harold continues to be the best thing about this miniseries. Although it saddens me that out of a cast this large, he's the only one that feels like a really developed character. And he's this icky, nice guy who feels entitled to his crush, and he's also a huge coward. But he is the only one that feels like an authentic, genuine person. Owen Teague is giving the best performance by far on this show, and he really deserves all the screen time that he's getting. I just wish that they've managed to develop the other characters as well as they developed Harold. I really like the special effects that they did with the guy that they found who was crucified. His acting was top-notch, although I feel like the reactions of everyone in the room whenever his eyes blackened and crows started flying at the window was way too subdued. I know that all the characters are a little bit desensitized, but the only one that really seemed scared was Fran. It doesn't matter how scary something is on screen, if the characters in the scene aren't reacting with horror to the scary elements in the scene, it really cuts the tension. So I feel like their subdued reactions didn't help this scene live up to its full potential. At the beginning of episode 4, we see all of the major characters getting ready for the big town meeting. Presumably this meeting is to discuss the guy that they found who had the crucifixion injuries. Once this meeting starts, the show does something that is kind of confusing, which causes me to have a new problem with the timeline. Not only do we have flashbacks between the past, where people are still journeying to Boulder, and the present, but now we have flashbacks between the present and the slightly future present. For some reason, during the town hall meeting where Stu and Larry are trying to keep people calm, we keep flashing back to the ad hoc committee meeting that presumably happened a few days before, where they're discussing how to keep people calm. There is no reason why they couldn't have shown the scene where they were discussing what they were going to say before the town hall meeting. All of this time hopping makes it feel like the show just can't sit still for 5 minutes, and it is so frustrating. Also, where the heck is Mother Abigail? It feels like she's been in 2 real scenes outside of all of the vision dreams. Seriously, by the time she dramatically disappears, is anyone gonna notice? So, on the plus side, in this episode, we see Nadine seduce Harold. This is one of the scenes that I feel was done at least as well as the original miniseries, and almost as well as the book. Although I have to admit I was kind of confused about what happened at first, but apparently Harold finishes in his pants. Anyway, this scene feels just as weird and awkward as it did in the books, which is good because this is child abuse and it should feel weird and wrong, and it does. So the scene definitely succeeds. Later in this episode, Harold and Nadine are stealing explosives. They get caught by Teddy, who is Harold's only real friend at this time, and Nadine shoots him. Why they decided to have Nadine shoot this character after building Harold and Teddy's friendship for 4 episodes, I have no idea. Honestly, I think this scene would have been so much better if Harold had been the one to pull the trigger. Because he's a coward, I could totally see him shooting Teddy to save his own butt. Also, it would have felt like a point of no return for Harold's character morally if he was the one that shot his only friend. Having Nadine do it felt very anticlimactic, and it felt like a wasted opportunity to me. I hope they managed to salvage this and make this scene feel as important as it was when they were building up to it. But honestly, I think that they probably wasted this friendship arc and all the time they spent developing it. When Nick and Tom escape Crazy Julie, you get a glimpse of the real friendship that develops between them in the original miniseries and in the book. Although I think that both Nick and Tom are portrayed well and that their conditions are handled in a very respectful way, I don't feel like they get enough scenes together. This is partly due to Nick not getting enough scenes, period, but I really feel like their friendship isn't as developed as it is in the original miniseries and in the book. By the time Tom is given the mission to go to Vegas, we don't feel the weight of it like we should. And none of the characters seem all that affected by it either, except for Fran. Similar to their subdued reactions to the guy who was clearly undergoing some form of demonic possession, they don't seem that affected by the idea of sending Tom on what is realistically a suicide mission. Also, for some reason, instead of having Nick be the one that suggests Tom be a spy, they have Glenn make the suggestion. I don't know why they made this change because this is literally one of Nick's most defining moments. Nick has been underestimated his whole life because he's deaf, and he sees how Tom is also underestimated, and it's Nick's experience that gives him the insight to see how Tom is the perfect candidate for this mission. Glenn and Tom don't even have a relationship, so it's really weird that Glenn would be the one to make this suggestion, and it just doesn't make sense. It feels like they once again took something away from Nick's character, and it didn't add anything to the story. Overall, I was kind of let down by the last 2 episodes. It seems pretty consistent that every time they give us a scene that's a substitute for something that was in the original miniseries, it's not as good as the original. And every time they give us a scene that's pulled directly out of the book, the scene ends up being pretty good. Unfortunately, it feels like a lot of what they pull from the book isn't necessary for this miniseries, and all of the scenes that they create specifically for this miniseries, like Nadine shooting Teddy, doesn't seem like it's going to be that great. I'll definitely keep watching because The Stand is one of my favorite Stephen King stories, and despite my complaints, there's a lot of good here. The sets are fantastic, the special effects are great, and Owen Teague is killing it as Harold. So I'm going to keep watching, and I hope that the story gets better. Now that we're mostly in the present, I'm hoping that there's going to be less flashbacks and time hopping. Hopefully. If you liked this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I'll be reviewing episode 5 and 6 in a couple of weeks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.